The night my son told me my inheritance was gone, the kettle began to whistle. I turned the burner off and let the kitchen grow quiet. He stood by the porch door and said the money had vanished in fees and taxes. He said there was nothing left. I nodded. I stirred my tea. I let him believe it. My name is May. I am 72 years old. I live in a small brick house on the edge of Chicago. There are 2 walnut trees out back, a dusty driveway, and a porch light that hums at dusk. I taught bookkeeping for many years. I trust numbers more than speeches. Numbers are calm. They tell the truth when you line them up and let them breathe. My husband, Franklin, passed away last winter. He left me a letter in a plain envelope and a copy of a trust we had built together. He had steady hands and a steady mind. He always said love should come with tools. The trust held our house, a savings account, and a piece of land by a small lake in Michigan. It also held a quiet clause that I had almost forgotten. If anyone tried to take control of my money without proof I lacked capacity, the trust would pay a lawyer to defend my rights. Franklin loved me with paper that could stand up in a hard wind. My son is Daniel. He is my only child. He married young and fast. His wife, Kira, smiles with all her teeth. They work in real estate and talk about leverage at Sunday dinner. They call debt a tool. I call debt a leash unless it is held with care. The first sign came as a kindness. Daniel said probate is messy. He said he would help me with the bank and the transfer of title. He asked for my card to pay a filing fee. I gave it to him. He brought it back the next morning with a small joke about me joining the digital age. My phone chirped while I peeled apples for a pie. A new banking app had been set up in my name. I did not set it up. My card declined at the grocery store that afternoon. The clerk tried twice. The screen flashed red. I paid with cash from the cookie tin. I walked to the bank the next day under a gray sky. The manager was a young woman named Ms. Reed. She had clear eyes and a careful way of speaking. We sat in her small office that smelled like lemon cleaner. She pulled my account on her screen. A fraud alert had been placed. A family member had called to report that I was confused and might misplace funds. The bank had frozen my card to protect me. I watched Ms. Reed watch me. I kept my voice even. I asked who called. She said she could not reveal that. I asked to unfreeze the card. She said she would, but only if I came back with a letter from the attorney named in my trust. I smiled. Franklin again. Tools. I called the number in Franklin's letter. The attorney was Mr. Alvarez. His voice was slow and warm, like a man who has seen storms and knows where the safe rooms are. He met me the same afternoon. He read the trust. He nodded at the clause about defending my autonomy. He wrote a letter on his letterhead and walked with me to the bank. Ms. Reed lifted the freeze and removed the third-party alert. She printed a note that said no one could restrict my access without a court order. She signed it in blue ink. I slipped it into a clear sleeve. Paper can be armor when you keep it dry and near at hand. That evening Daniel came by with a file folder. He stood in my kitchen and set the folder on the table like a doctor with bad news. He said the inheritance was much smaller than we expected. He said taxes and fees had eaten most of it. He slid a summary page across the table. The numbers were tidy but wrong. A line for estate tax that did not apply. A line for penalties that did not exist. A line for consulting services that sounded like fog. I looked at the page. I looked at my son. He avoided my eyes and asked me not to worry. He said we would take care of me. I turned on the kettle for 2 cups of tea and walked to the hall while the water heated. In the hall closet sat a small fireproof box. I opened it with the key Franklin had labeled in his neat hand. Inside was the original trust, a certified copy of our deed, the letter to Mr. Alvarez, and a second envelope with my name on it. I had never opened it. I did now. There was a short note and a small brass key. The note said the key opened a safety deposit box at the downtown branch. It listed the branch address and the box number in Franklin's careful script. He wrote one line that made me close my eyes. If fear ever knocks, go open the box before you open your mouth. I made the tea. I thanked my son for the update. I told him I was tired. He hugged me lightly and left with the folder. The porch light hummed. The walnut leaves clapped in a soft wind. I washed the cups and let the house go quiet. I did not argue. I did not accuse. I let him believe the story he had chosen to tell. The next morning I took the bus downtown. The vault at the bank was cool and smelled like metal and dust. A clerk brought the gray box to a small room. I used the brass key and lifted the lid. Inside were government bonds, a certificate for shares in a regional utility, and a cashier's check with a recent date made out to my trust. There was also a letter from Franklin. He had sold a parcel of timber 2 months before his passing. He had put the proceeds into the trust as cash. He wrote that people can count what they can see, but there is comfort in what is kept quiet until needed. I placed the bonds and the certificate back in the box. I put the note in my purse. I called Mr. Alvarez from the sidewalk. I told him everything. He said to gather proof and keep my hand steady. He asked for copies of the misleading summary page. He asked me to speak to no one about the safety deposit box. He said patience is a tool when you are building a wall. Over the next weeks, I watched and recorded. A small transfer left my checking account each Friday and landed in an account I did not recognize. I asked the bank to trace it. It linked to a new joint account that had my name on it and an address that was not my home. My son had used the new app to open it. The amount was small enough to feel ordinary and large enough to matter over time. I did not stop it. I let the pattern mark itself like footprints in wet sand. Kira began to stop by with quick errands. She brought forms to sign in a stack with grocery coupons. One was a new power of attorney that would let Daniel speak for me at banks and hospitals. I moved it to the bottom of the stack and kept the coupons. I poured coffee. I asked about work. She talked about a new condo project and how investors love speed. She said time is money. I stirred my cup and said time is truth. My neighbor, Mrs. Carter, is a retired nurse with binoculars for birds and for trouble. She saw Kira take pictures of my mailbox one morning. Mrs. Carter told me while we watered tomatoes by the shared fence. I thanked her and brought her a pie still warm from the oven. She said the crust was perfect. She said keep your papers safe. I said they were safe. Mr. Alvarez filed a quiet petition in probate court to confirm the trust assets and to secure a protective order against unauthorized control. He asked a judge to review the bank trace under seal. He requested a hearing date. He told me not to warn Daniel. He said we would let the law speak first. On the morning of the hearing, the courthouse smelled like old wood and floor wax. I wore my dark dress and my husband's watch. Daniel sat across the aisle with Kira. He looked like a boy in a suit on a school stage. Kira squeezed his hand and whispered. The judge was a woman with silver hair and steady eyes. She asked Mr. Alvarez to begin. Mr. Alvarez showed the trust. He showed the clause about defending my autonomy. He showed the bank letter removing the third-party alert. He showed the trace of the weekly transfers and the documents that opened the joint account. He showed the false summary with wrong fees and the typed line for consulting. He did not raise his voice. He put each page on the small screen beside the bench. Numbers and dates. Calm and clear. The judge turned to my son. She asked if he had opened the joint account. He said yes. He said he feared I was not managing bills. He said he was protecting me. She asked if he had proof that I could not handle my affairs. He shook his head. He said I seemed scattered since Franklin died. He said grief can make people careless. The judge nodded once. She asked who wrote the false tax and fee lines. He looked at Kira. She touched his arm. He said he got help. The judge turned to me. She asked if I managed my own finances. I said I do. I said I teach bookkeeping to the youth group on Saturdays in the church basement. I said numbers calm me. I said grief is a storm but storms pass. I handed up a folder with my budget, my paid bills, and a log of every transfer for the last 3 months. My columns were straight and my totals matched. The judge reviewed the pages. She smiled with only her eyes. Then Mr. Alvarez asked permission to submit one more item. The judge agreed. He held up the second envelope and the small brass key. He explained the safety deposit box and the bonds and the cashier's check. He said the trust assets were intact and growing. He said the claim that the inheritance was gone was not true. He said we let it stand in silence to see what would be done with that false story. The judge took a breath and spoke slowly. She said capacity is not taken by whispers. She said guardianship is not a shortcut to cash flow. She ordered the joint account closed and the transfers returned to my trust. She ordered that no one could restrict my banking access without a medical evaluation and a court order. She set a review date in 90 days. She told my son to look at me when he spoke. He did. His eyes were wet. He said he was sorry. It sounded like a beginning and not an end. Outside the courtroom the sun was high and bright. Kira walked ahead and did not speak. Daniel asked if we could sit for a moment. We found a bench under a young maple. The air smelled like hot pavement and popcorn from a vendor cart. He said fear had eaten him. He said the condo project was behind and investors wanted their money back. He said he thought the inheritance could buy them time. He said he told himself he would put it back. He said a lie feels small when you first hold it, and then it grows teeth. I listened. I folded my hands. I told him fear is loud and numbers are quiet. I told him I would not call the police. The judge had done enough. I told him I would not give him cash. I offered him something else. I said he could work for me as a bookkeeper for the small foundation Franklin and I had set up years ago in the youth center's name. He could earn a fair wage. He could learn the craft the slow way. He could sit with numbers until they calmed him. He could show me each month how the ledger tells the truth. He nodded. He cried. He hugged me like a child who had run too far. And found the porch light still on. Kira left the bench and walked to the street. She did not turn back. In the weeks that followed, life found a new rhythm. I met Ms. Reed at the bank and added a second note to my file. No changes by phone. Only in person with me and my identification. I moved the bonds in the safety box to a ladder of certificates in the trust so that interest would pay property taxes and winter heat. I added my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, as a trusted contact for wellness checks only, not for money. She brought me tomatoes. I brought her pie. Daniel came to the youth center on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He swept the floor before class. He taught teenagers how to balance a check register. He admitted his mistakes without drama. He learned that reconciling an account is a quiet act of respect. You match what you said against what happened. You own the difference. You adjust. You keep going. One evening in early fall, the porch light clicked on while the sky was still pink. I sat with my tea and watched a raccoon cross the dusty driveway like a thief who had retired. Daniel sat beside me. He told me he had ended the condo project. He was paying back what he could and sending letters to the rest. He had taken a job at a small firm to learn how to do things right. He asked if I would come to a meeting with him to speak to a group about elder fraud. I said yes. He smiled and looked older in a good way. Here is what I learned. Money is not love and love is not money. Inheritance is not a prize. It is a promise to carry family work forward with care. If someone lies about your money, do not rush to shout. Gather paper. Find allies. Let the law do the loud talking. Dignity can be quiet. Boundaries can be kind and firm at the same time. I let my son believe the inheritance was gone so he would show me who he was. When he saw himself, he chose better. That was the gift I could give. Not cash. Not rescue. A clear mirror and a door that was not locked. Subscribe to Voices by May for more unforgettable family stories.